This ugly, scratched-up dime looks like it barely survived a parking lot, but one tiny P mint mark on a coin just like it turned pocket change into over $100,000. Most people would toss it into a Coinstar machine without a second thought. But what if that dirty Roosevelt dime hiding in your jar right now is secretly worth more than a brand new pickup truck? Before I reveal anything else, first coin, most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up a 1987 dime off the ground. It's common, it's modern, it's still showing up in pocket change every single day. And if it looks dirty, scratched, or worn smooth from decades of use, most folks assume it's worth exactly 10 cents. But here's what almost nobody realizes. A 1987 dime with a small P mint mark can be worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars, if it has the right hidden details. And the craziest part? Many of the most valuable examples look completely ordinary at first glance. Let's break this down in the simplest way possible so you know exactly what to look for. First, grab any 1987 Roosevelt dime and flip it over to the front. Look just above the date. You should see a tiny letter. If there's a small P right above the 1987, that means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. In 1987, Philadelphia produced hundreds of millions of dimes. So yes, most are common. Most are only worth face value. But not all of them. In 1987, something interesting happened with certain proof coins and high-quality strikes. Some 1987 P dimes were struck with unusually strong details, while others show dramatic minting errors that collectors pay serious money for today. Now here's where it gets exciting. There are 3 simple clues that can turn an ugly 1987 P dime into a serious payday. Clue number 1, look for a doubled die. You don't need a microscope. You don't need fancy equipment. Just grab a magnifying glass or even your phone camera and zoom in on the date and the word Liberty. On rare double die varieties, you'll notice the numbers in 1987 look slightly doubled, almost like there's a shadow behind them. The letters in Liberty may look thicker or slightly split at the edges. To most people, it just looks like wear. But to collectors, that doubling means the coin was struck with a misaligned die. And when that happens on a Philadelphia dime from the 1980s, values can jump fast. Depending on condition, a genuine double die 1987 P dime can sell for several $100s. And if it's in high mint state condition, with minimal wear, prices can climb into the thousands. Now here's the twist. Sometimes these coins look dirty. They look scratched. They've been in circulation for decades. But the doubling is still there. And collectors will absolutely pay for it. Clue number 2, full bands. Flip the dime to the back and look at the torch in the center. See the 2 horizontal lines across the middle of the torch? Those are called the bands. On most circulated 1987 P dimes, those bands are weak or blended together. But on rare, sharply struck examples, those bands are fully separated and clearly defined. Collectors call this full bands. If you can clearly see a strong separation between the top and bottom lines of the torch bands, even on a coin that looks slightly worn, that's a major clue. In high-grade uncirculated condition with full bands, a 1987 P dime has sold for thousands of dollars at auction. And here's the shocker. Some of these were pulled straight from circulation rolls years after they were minted. They didn't look special. They weren't shiny proofs. They were just strong strikes that slipped into everyday use. Now imagine this. You're going through an old coin jar. You find a dull 1987 dime. It's got grime around the edges. It's been rattling around for years. But the bands on the torch are crisp. The details are sharp. That coin could be worth hundreds instead of 10 cents. And here's the third clue that can send values soaring. Off-center strikes and major mint errors. In 1987, like every year, a small number of dimes left the mint with dramatic errors. We're talking about coins that were struck off-center so part of the design is missing. Or dimes that were struck on the wrong planchet. Or pieces that show strong die cracks running across the surface. Most people see damage. Collectors see opportunity. A 1987 P dime that struck 10 to 20% off-center, while still showing the full date, can sell for several $100s. If the off-center strike is more dramatic and still clearly shows 1987 and that P, prices can go even higher. And here's what makes this so powerful for you. Error coins often look ugly. They look messed up. They look damaged. And because of that, they get ignored. That's exactly why they slip through unnoticed. Now let's talk condition for a moment, because this is where serious money comes into play. A regular circulated 1987 P dime with heavy wear is usually worth face value. But if you find one that looks almost new, no wear on Roosevelt's cheek, strong hair details, sharp rims, that's what collectors call mint state. If that mint state coin also has full bands, the value jumps dramatically. High-grade examples graded MS-67 or higher have brought thousands at auction. That's for a 10-cent coin most Americans wouldn't even bother picking up. And yes, those high grades are rare. But they're not impossible. Especially if someone tucked away rolls of dimes in the 1980s and forgot about them. Or if you inherited a coin collection and never checked the details carefully. Here's something else most people don't realize. The 1987 P dime had a lower mintage compared to some other years in the 1980s. While still produced in the hundreds of millions, fewer were made than in certain surrounding years. That alone doesn't make it rare. But when you combine slightly lower production with rare strike qualities and mint errors, it creates scarcity at the top levels. Next coin, a scratched, gray 1985 dime with a tiny P above the date might look like it barely survived a trip through a washing machine, but in the right condition, with the right tiny details, one of these has sold for thousands of dollars. And the wild part? Most of them are still floating around in everyday pocket change. The 1985 P Roosevelt dime was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and millions upon millions were made. On the surface, that sounds like bad news. High mintage usually means low value. That's why so many people ignore them. They see 1985 and immediately think, modern. Common. Worth 10 cents. But this is exactly where opportunity hides. Because while most 1985 P dimes are ordinary, a very small percentage have features that collectors aggressively hunt for. And just like the 1987 we talked about, the most valuable examples often don't look flashy. They can look slightly dull. Slightly dirty. Even lightly scratched from circulation. Let's walk through the simple clues that can turn this humble dime into serious money. First, flip the coin over and study the torch on the back. This is the number one detail you need to focus on. Look closely at the two horizontal lines across the center of the torch. These are called the bands. On most 1985 P dimes, those bands appear weak or partially blended together. They may look flat, especially on circulated coins. But on rare, sharply struck examples, those bands are fully separated with clear, distinct lines. You should be able to see a strong gap between the upper and lower band lines without them touching or fading together. Collectors call this full bands. And this is where things get serious. A 1985 P dime in ordinary condition is worth face value. But a mint state example, meaning no wear on Roosevelt's cheek, no flattening of the hair, strong rim edges, with full bands can bring hundreds. In very high grades, especially those graded MS-67 or higher with full bands, auction results have reached into the thousands. That's for a coin most people would drop in a tip jar. Now here's what makes this even more interesting. In 1985, the Philadelphia Mint struggled with consistent strike quality on some runs of dimes. That means fully struck examples are scarcer than you'd expect. Many coins left the mint with slightly mushy details, especially in the torch area. So when a sharply struck 1985 P with blazing details shows up, collectors take notice. And here's the key point for you. Even if the coin looks a little toned or slightly dirty, if the bands are clearly separated and the surfaces show minimal wear, it could still carry strong value. Dirt does not equal damage. Original surfaces are actually preferred by collectors over cleaned coins. Now let's move to the second powerful clue. Double die varieties. You don't need to understand complicated minting mechanics. Just grab a magnifying glass or use your phone camera and zoom in on the date and the word Liberty. On certain 1985p dimes, you may notice slight doubling on the numbers or letters. It can look like a faint shadow, a thickening of the edges, or slight separation in the lettering. To the untrained eye, it may just look worn. But if that doubling is consistent and clear, it could indicate a double die variety, and those are highly collectible. Values for minor doubling might range into the low hundreds, but stronger examples, especially in high-grade condition, can push much higher. And remember, many of these coins circulated for years before anyone noticed. That means you could still find one in a coin jar today. Now here's the third area that can create big money. Mint errors. This is where the ugly coins sometimes win. Look for off-center strikes. If the design appears shifted and part of the coin is blank, but you can still clearly see the full date 1985 and the P, that's a major plus. Off-center errors showing 10 to 20% misalignment can easily sell for several $100s. More dramatic examples can go even higher. Also watch for thick rims, unusual shapes, clipped planchets where a portion of the edge looks sliced off, or strong die cracks that run across the surface like lightning bolts. Most people assume these are damaged coins. Collectors know better. Real mint errors happen during the striking process at the mint. They are part of the coin's history, not post-mint damage. And authentic errors from the 1980s are actively collected. Now let's talk condition again, because this is where fortunes are made or lost. The biggest money for a 1985p dime comes from coins that appear almost brand new. The cheek of Roosevelt should be smooth and unworn. The hair above his ear should show clear detail. The rims should be sharp and raised. And when you tilt the coin under light, you should see original mint luster, that soft cartwheel shine moving across the surface. If you find one like that with full bands, do not clean it. Not with a cloth. Not with baking soda. Not with anything. Cleaning creates tiny hairline scratches that destroy collector value instantly. Even light cleaning can turn a $1,000 coin into 10 cents. And here's something that surprises many people. The difference between a coin worth face value and one worth thousands can be nearly invisible without careful inspection. Two 1985p dimes can sit side by side and look almost identical. But one has slightly sharper torch bands. Slightly cleaner fields. Slightly stronger strike detail. That tiny difference can mean everything. High-grade 1985p dimes with full bands are especially sought after by collectors building top-tier Roosevelt dime sets. Registry set collectors compete fiercely for the highest-graded examples. And when only a handful exist at the very top grade, prices explode. That's how a coin that once bought a stick of gum can end up selling for more than a used car. Now imagine this scenario. You're going through a jar of old coins. You see a 1985 dime. It looks dull. Maybe slightly toned around the edges. You almost toss it aside. But you flip it over. You check the torch. The bands are sharp. You tilt it under light. The surface flashes with mint luster. Next coin, a worn-out 1978 dime with a tiny P mint mark can look like it's been dragged across asphalt for 40 years, but one nearly identical coin shocked collectors by selling for thousands of dollars. And most people would have spent it without a second thought. The 1978p Roosevelt dime is one of those coins that hides in plain sight. It's not old enough to feel antique. It's not silver. It doesn't look rare. In fact, it's still one of the most commonly overlooked dimes in circulation. But here's the truth. While millions were made at the Philadelphia Mint in 1978, only a tiny fraction meet the standards collectors are willing to pay serious money for. And just like the other coins we've talked about, the difference between 10 cents and a four-figure payday often comes down to small details most people never notice. Let's start with the simplest check. Flip the coin to the front. Look just above the date 1978. If you see a small P, that means it was struck in Philadelphia. Back in the 1970s, Philadelphia was producing massive numbers of coins, and quality control wasn't always perfect. That's actually good news for you. Because when quality varies, exceptional examples become scarce. Now turn the coin over and focus on the torch on the reverse. This is where the real money often hides. Look at the two horizontal lines across the center of the torch. These are the bands. On most 1978p dimes, especially ones that circulated, those bands are weak. They may look flat, blended, or partially touching. That's normal. But if you find a 1978p dime where those bands are fully separated, meaning you can clearly see a strong line between the upper and lower bands with no merging, that's what collectors call full bands. And this is where values start climbing fast. In circulated condition, even with decent detail, a 1978p dime is usually worth face value. But in mint state condition with full bands, especially at very high grades, prices can jump into the hundreds, and in rare top-tier grades, even into the thousands. Here's what makes 1978 particularly interesting. The Philadelphia Mint that year did not consistently produce sharply struck dimes. Many were slightly soft in the torch area. So finding one with razor-sharp bands is much harder than you'd think. That scarcity at the high end is what drives big auction results. Now let's talk about what mint state really means in simple terms. Look at Roosevelt's cheek. If it's flat and dull, that's wear from circulation. If the hair above his ear looks smooth or faded, that's also wear. A true mint state coin will have no flattening on the high points. The details will look crisp. When you tilt the coin under a light, you should see a soft cartwheel shine move across the surface. That shine is original mint luster. And here's the part that surprises people. Even if the coin looks slightly toned or a little dirty around the edges, it can still be mint state. Dirt does not automatically mean damage. In fact, original, untouched surfaces are often preferred over cleaned coins. Never clean a 1978p dime you think might be valuable. Cleaning can instantly destroy collector value by leaving tiny hairline scratches that are easy to spot under magnification. Now let's move to another hidden opportunity with the 1978p dime. Doubled dies. Grab a magnifying glass or use your phone camera and zoom in on the date and the word Liberty. On some 1978p dimes, you may notice slight doubling in the numbers or letters. It can look like a faint shadow or thickening along the edges of the design. To someone unfamiliar with error coins, it might just look worn. But real doubling caused during the minting process can add serious collector interest. Stronger double die examples, especially in high-grade condition, can sell for hundreds of dollars. Combine that with full bands, and now you're talking about a coin that becomes highly desirable to advanced collectors. And then there are mint errors. This is where things get exciting for coins that look damaged. If you find a 1978p dime that's struck off center, meaning part of the design is missing and one side is blank, but you can still clearly see the full date 1978 and the P mint mark, that's a genuine mint error. Depending on how dramatic the shift is, values can easily reach several $100s or more. Look for clipped planchets, where a curved piece appears missing from the edge. Look for thick, uneven rims. Look for die cracks running across the coin like thin raised lines. Most people assume those are flaws. Collectors know their features. Now here's something important about the 1978p specifically. While it isn't rare in general, truly high-grade examples are much scarcer than you'd think. Registry set collectors, the serious competitors building top-quality Roosevelt dime collections, are constantly hunting for the highest-graded 1978p with full bands. Next coin, a plain-looking 1967 dime with no mint mark at all might seem like the most ordinary coin in your drawer, but one special version of this coin has sold for thousands of dollars, and most people don't even realize what makes it different. Here's the first surprise. If you grab a 1967 Roosevelt dime and look above the date, you won't see a P. You won't see a D. You won't see an S. That's because in 1967, dimes were struck without mint marks. Every single one. So at first glance, that sounds like bad news. If they all look the same, how can any be valuable? This is where it gets interesting. In 1967, the U.S. Mint produced not only regular circulation dimes, but also something called special mint set coins, often called SMS coins. These weren't quite proof coins, and they weren't quite regular circulation coins. They were made with better dies and extra care, giving them a sharper, more detailed appearance. And those 1967 SMS dimes, especially the finest examples, are where the big money hides. Now here's how you can tell the difference without complicated tools. First, look at the surface of the coin under a light. A normal circulated 1967 dime will look dull, worn, maybe scratched from years of use. The details on Roosevelt's cheek may be flat. The torch on the back may look soft or blended. But a special mint set 1967 dime has a very distinct look. The surface often has a smooth, satin-like finish. Not mirror shiny like a proof coin, but silky and even. When you tilt it under light, the shine moves softly across the surface. Next, look at the rims, the very edges of the coin. SMS dimes often have sharper, more squared-off rims compared to regular circulation strikes. The details appear crisp and bold. And here's the key detail collectors obsess over. Flip the coin over and study the torch on the reverse. Look at the horizontal bands across the center. On most regular 1967 dimes, those bands are weak or blended together. But on higher quality strikes, especially SMS coins, the bands can appear clearly separated. Collectors call this full bands. A regular worn 1967 dime is worth face value. But a 1967 SMS dime in pristine condition with strong full bands can sell for hundreds. And at the very highest grades, certified examples have crossed into the thousands. That's for a coin many people overlook simply because it doesn't have a mint mark. Now here's something even more exciting. There are rare 1967 SMS dimes with a special finish known among collectors for their almost proof-like contrast. These are extremely scarce. They show sharper details and stronger visual appeal than typical SMS coins. When one of these appears in top condition, collectors compete aggressively. And when collectors compete, prices rise fast. But we're not done. Because even regular 1967 circulation dimes can hold surprises. Let's talk about errors. One of the most valuable types of 1967 dimes are those with missing clad layers. Remember, by 1967, dimes were no longer silver. They were made of a copper core sandwiched between nickel layers. If one of those outer layers is missing due to a minting mistake, the coin can appear copper-colored on one side. To most people, it looks damaged or discolored. To collectors, it's a mint error worth serious money. A 1967 dime missing a clad layer can sell for hundreds of dollars depending on condition. If both layers are affected or the error is dramatic, the value can climb even higher. Also watch for off-center strikes. If the design appears shifted and part of the coin is blank, but the full date 1967 is still visible, that's important. The more dramatic the off-center strike, while keeping the date readable, the more valuable it can be. You don't need to understand how they happen. Just grab a magnifying glass or use your phone's zoom and inspect the date and the word Liberty. If you see clear doubling, not just blur from wear, but distinct separation in the numbers or letters, you could be looking at a double die variety. Strong examples can command solid prices, especially in higher grade condition. Here's another thing most people miss. Because 1967 coins were made during a time when collectors were being discouraged from hoarding, many were heavily circulated. That means truly high-grade examples, coins that somehow avoided wear, are much harder to find today than you might expect. A 1967 dime with no wear, sharp details, strong rims, and blazing original luster is far scarcer than the mintage numbers suggest. And scarcity at the top is what drives four-figure auction results. Now imagine this scenario. You're digging through an old drawer and find a small envelope of coins someone saved decades ago. Inside is a 1967 dime that looks slightly different. It has a smooth satin glow. The rims are sharp. The torch bands are crisp and separated. That coin could be from a special mint set. And if it's in exceptional condition, it might be worth far more than 10 cents. Here's what you absolutely should not do. Do not clean it. Even if it looks dull or lightly toned, cleaning can destroy the very surface quality that makes SMS coins valuable. Collectors want original surfaces. They want untouched coins. A cleaned 1967 SMS dime can lose most of its premium instantly. Now let's talk about condition in the simplest way possible. Look at Roosevelt's cheek. Is it flat and worn? Or smooth and untouched? Check the hair above his ear. Is it detailed and sharp? Tilt the coin under a bright light. Do you see a consistent, soft shine moving across the surface? The more original and unworn the coin looks, the more potential value it may have. The 1967 dime teaches one powerful lesson. Mint marks aren't everything. Next coin. A dark, worn 1965 dime that looks like it's been rattling around in a toolbox for 50 years might seem completely ordinary, but one version of this coin has sold for thousands of dollars, and most people have no idea why. Here's why 1965 is such a powerful year. In 1965, the United States changed the composition of the dime. Before 1965, dimes were 90% silver. Starting in 1965, they were made with a copper core and nickel outer layers. That means most 1,965 dimes you find are not silver. But here's the shocker. A tiny number of 1,965 dimes were accidentally struck on leftover silver planchets from 1964. And when one of those shows up, collectors go crazy. Let's make this simple so you know exactly what to look for. First, grab any 1965 dime and look at the edge. A normal clad 1965 dime will show a copper-colored stripe running through the center of the edge. That copper sandwich line is your first clue it's standard. But if you find a 1965 dime with a completely solid silver-colored edge, no copper stripe at all, stop right there. That could be a transitional silver error. Now, you must be careful. Some lighting can hide the copper stripe. So tilt the coin and examine it closely. If there is absolutely no trace of copper on the edge, that's when things get serious. Because confirmed 1965 silver dimes have sold for thousands of dollars. Think about that. A coin most people treat as 10 cents could actually be worth the price of a vacation, just because it was struck on the wrong metal during a year of transition. And here's what makes it even more exciting. Many of these coins circulated unnoticed for years. They look slightly darker from age. They may have scratches. They might not appear special at all. But the metal tells the story. Now let's talk about weight, in the simplest way possible. A normal clad 1965 dime weighs about 2.27 grams. A silver dime weighs about 2.5 grams. That difference may seem tiny, but it's enough for collectors to confirm a rare error. You don't need laboratory equipment. A small digital jewelry scale can detect that difference. But even without a scale, the edge is your fastest first test. Now here's something else about 1965 that most people miss. Just like 1967, 1965 also had special mint set coins. These SMS dimes have a satin-like surface and sharper details compared to normal circulation strikes. High-grade 1965 SMS dimes with strong details and clean surfaces can sell for hundreds. In extremely high grades, especially with strong full bands on the torch, prices can reach into the thousands. Again, the key detail is on the reverse. Flip the coin over and look at the torch. Focus on the horizontal bands in the center. If they are clearly separated and not blending together, that's what collectors call full bands. Most 1965 dimes, especially circulated ones, will not have strong bands. But a sharply struck example with no wear and clear separation becomes much more desirable. And here's another opportunity hiding in plain sight. 1965 dimes with missing clad layers. Because this was the first year of the new copper-nickel composition, mistakes happened. Some dimes were struck with one of the outer nickel layers missing. When that happens, the coin may appear copper-colored on one side. Most people assume it's damaged or stained. But if the copper tone looks smooth and consistent, not scratched or scraped, it could be a genuine mint error worth hundreds of dollars. Also watch for off-center strikes. If part of the design is shifted and blank space shows on one side, but the full date 1965 is visible, that's important. The more dramatic the off-center strike, the more collectors are willing to pay. And let's not forget double dies. Use a magnifying glass or your phone's zoom and inspect the date and the word Liberty. If you see clear, distinct doubling, not just blur from wear, that could indicate a collectible variety. Strong examples in high-grade condition can command solid premiums. But the real superstar of 1965 will always be that accidental silver strike. Imagine going through a jar of coins passed down from a relative. You pull out a dull 1965 dime. It doesn't shine. It doesn't sparkle. It looks just like every other dime. But then you check the edge. No copper stripe. Just solid silver color. That's the moment your heart should skip a beat. Because if it's genuine, you're not holding 10 cents. You're holding a rare transitional error from one of the most important years in modern US coin history. Now here's something critical. Do not clean it. If you think you found a silver 1965 dime or a valuable SMS example, leave it exactly as it is. Cleaning can ruin the surface and reduce its value dramatically. Collectors want originality. Even dark toning is often preferred over a bright, polished surface. Condition still matters. Look at Roosevelt's cheek. Is it flat from wear, or smooth and untouched? Check the hair details. Examine the rims. Tilt the coin under a bright light and look for original mint luster moving across the surface. The closer it looks to brand new, the higher the potential value, especially for SMS and full bands examples. The 1965 dime is proof that major value can hide inside ordinary years. It marks the end of everyday silver coinage and the beginning of clad coinage. That transition created mistakes. And mistakes create opportunity. Somewhere out there, a 1965 silver era dime is still waiting to be discovered. Maybe in a coffee can. Maybe in a bank roll. Maybe in your own change jar. Thanks for watching.